Dockside Chat in a three-part series on Our Schools, Our Kids, sponsored by the Carteret County Democratic Party. Tonight, our focus is keeping great teachers and staff. My name is Susan Schurer. I'm a retired teacher from Pennsylvania, living permanently in Moorhead City, and a grandmother of children in the local school systems. I want to thank the volunteers who've made the Dockside Chat a reality. Katie Tomberlin, the chair of the Carteret County Democratic Party, Maria Zempel, Amy Voorhees, Lucy Bond, and Wendy Boss. The keeping of great teachers and staff is an ongoing lifelong pursuit for all of them. It begins with long years of education, planning, and the precise wording of a job description for a new teacher. It requires feedback, inspiration, and appreciation from everyone involved over the course of a career. It is a never-ending process for schools and communities. I am honored to introduce our most distinguished guests this evening in the order in which they will speak. There are 6 of them, so introductions will be brief. We will begin with voices in the community to hear their expectations of great teachers and move on to hear from a great teacher and a Board of Education member and the superintendent of schools. Jennifer Johnson is a mother of 3 school-age children, aged 10, 8, and 6, all attend Bogue Sound Elementary. She has a degree in social work from the University of Connecticut. She's a small business owner, vice president of the PTO, Seashore Soccer League coach, member of the NAACP, Citizens for Diversity in Education, a board member for the Carteret County Partnership for Children, board member for Family Promise, and a volunteer at Martha's Mission. Welcome, Jennifer Johnson. Our next 2 speakers were both educated in the Carteret County Public Schools. Today, they are the voice of Citizens for Diversity in Education, an organization started in 2015. They have already begun important work with Rob Jackson, the superintendent of schools, and in fact, have a meeting with him tomorrow. Missy Oden is employed in the field of industrial and systems engineering. Over the last few years, she has fully committed herself to groups like Concerned Citizens for Moorhead City and Citizens for Diversity in Education. Welcome, Missy. Cheryl Moraven retired in July 2018 after 37 years in education, working in the area of special education and also as an assistant principal, director in Carteret County Public Schools for 7 years and Craven County Public Schools for 2 years. Welcome, Cheryl Moraven. Jody Stauffer has been teaching art in North Carolina Public Schools for 27 years, and he is currently in charge of the Croatan High School Visual Art Program. He teaches advanced placement drawing and advanced placement 3D art and design, for which he was recertified last summer by the University of Texas, El Paso. He was voted Teacher of the Year in several systems in 2004, 2012, 2014, 2015, 2019-20 in Croatan High School, and 2020-21 for Carteret County Schools. Congratulations and welcome, Jody Stauffer. The Reverend Dennis Goodwin is a native of Moorhead City with a lot of relatives, he says, in Carteret County. He is retired as an Army Reserve chaplain at the rank of colonel in 2014, retired as a United Methodist pastor in 2016, and currently works as a realtor with Remax Ocean Properties and serves on the Carteret County Board of Education. Welcome, Reverend Goodwin. Dr. Rob Jackson is our superintendent of schools. Last time, I stressed his work in every conceivable level of employment in public education and his selection as the first superintendent to receive the Dr. Sam Houston Leadership Award in 2019. He is also the winner of the Dr. Brad Sneeden Superintendent Leadership Award, a past North Carolina State Principal of the Year, North Carolina High School Principal of the Year, and National Distinguished Principal. Wow. Welcome, Dr. Jackson. We have a very distinguished group on our panel tonight, and I am just thrilled. A quick reminder, all participants will be muted during the presentation. We will unmute you for 2 minutes at the end of the chat for goodbyes. Let me remind you to add your question to the chat box, and we will address them after hearing from our guests. And now we will start with voices from the community. Jennifer Johnson, mother of 3. What are your expectations of your children's teachers?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. So 3 words that come to my mind when I was thinking about what makes a great teacher is communication, dedication, and commitment. And I'm lucky that through my education, I've encountered many teachers who embodied those 3 words. And now my children also experience wonderful teachers in the Carteret County Public School System. I think communication is so key these days, especially during our pandemic when we were only going a couple times a day. And we're so lucky that we have the apps like the Dojo app where we can quickly send messages to teachers and have them respond to us immediately versus the old days where we wrote the agenda or had a note come back to us and hope that the note made it back in the backpack. So really having that open line of communication with teachers all the time is really wonderful, especially having younger kids. They don't always come home and tell me things. They tell me things, but not relevant things, like when I need to bring something in, something important that's going on in school. So I'm really thankful that we have those kind of apps and that the teachers use them so frequently, and our principals and all our administrators, to make sure that all parents always know what's going on. Dedication is such an important thing. And I can't imagine that a teacher gets into this profession not dedicated to the students, because it's certainly not something they're paid enough money for. And they certainly work many hours more than they're paid for. So I'm very thankful for all our teachers. An example of that, I would say, and I brought a little example of that, is when my kindergartner started school this year, we were on the cohort. So he only went to school 2 days a week. So in kindergarten is so much of hands-on learning. They sent us home an iPad, but that doesn't really embody what kindergarten is, playing and establishing relationships and hands-on. So his kindergarten teacher, Miss Gina Troball, who's wonderful, made, I'm sure with most of her own funds, a bucket up for every child to have everything they would need: sight words and dominoes and a magnifying glass for reading the hard words, and pens and pencils, and anything that a student may not have at home so that they could be successful. Another example of a dedication is my daughter's 4th grade teacher, who's a new teacher this year. Excuse me, this is her first year teaching. Because she's younger, technology comes so easy to her. So my 4th grader, who struggled a little bit last year in 3rd grade because of the technology, there were some days we were both crying about whether we could log on to Google Classroom and complete the assignments. We couldn't, we were all on that learning curve, including the teachers. This year, she said, "Mommy, it's so smooth. My teacher tells us exactly what we're supposed to do. We all know how to do it, and I just love it." So that was a lot of work, I'm sure, for all those teachers over the summer to really figure out how they could easily transition all these kids to know exactly what was expected of them, what they needed to do, how they needed to log on. So the difference I've seen from the end of the school year last year to the beginning of this year is just amazing. And I know that it's just hours and hours of teachers and administrators really working to try to figure out how they can do the best for their students in situations that, we didn't foresee. And certainly they weren't trained on, or, something. They just jumped it and did it. And, we're successful at it. And I'm really thankful for that.
I quite agree. You're making so many memories come up hearing mothers talk about young children in school. How do you know when your children are going off to school and coming home that their teacher has been excellent, besides sending home a bucket of stuff?
all my children, I'm lucky enough that I get to bring them to school every morning and pick them up. So as soon as they get in the car, they all go around. We take turns. They all want to talk at once. Tell me about your day. Tell me about your day. Tell me about your day. And I'll say that every student, when they tell me about their day, it involves something with their teacher. Miss Gina did this, Miss Prosser did this. My middle son, Weston, who's in second grade, adores his teacher. I mean, he could tell you everything about her her family, her daughters. I mean, and she just, current events, you can tell that she really values these children and treats them like little people to learn and grow, and lets them in on events in her life. So, I mean, every single day, my children come home happy, excited to go back to school, lots of wonderful things to say about their teachers. So I'm lucky that I have very few complaints.
Yes, you are lucky. Your children have excellent
Yeah,
teachers. It's very
they do.
clear. Very
They do.
clear. Let me move along. Missy Oden, can you give us your opinion on how we can make sure there is diversity in the pipeline of new teachers coming into the schools?
Well, just like to say good evening to everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. I also thank God for this opportunity to share and to be a vessel. I think it is important. The key, I believe, is that we continue to build relationships, to be involved, and to encourage transparency at all levels. Which would include groups like Citizens for Diversity in Education, whose primary focus is to connect our minority teachers, firstly, with one another. You'll be surprised when we first started out on this journey last year of how many teachers didn't even know that there were other minority teachers at other schools. And so firstly, in order to strengthen that pipeline, we have to understand what the pool entails, so to speak. That way you can, once you get information, you can share it with others. Once you have challenges, you don't have to feel like you're isolated and alone and going through them. It will kind of be normalized for you. It's a means of sharing resources as far as when new hiring openings are opening in the system. And that's how you begin to strengthen that structure and be intentional about meeting the need that we currently see within our local school system. And fortunately, we've had the opportunity to work with people like Dr. Jackson, who have been open and receptive. We are seeing that not everybody is on board with seeing the need. So we're hoping that in our continuing conversations on different platforms, that others will begin to not just hear it. Again, we like to reiterate that it's not about Black, it's not about white, it's really about providing opportunity and making sure there's equity in those opportunities that's afforded to each. Like I was saying, the groups like Citizens for Diversity in Education is just one step, but we can't stop there. It also requires engagement and support within our local government entities. Go into our town council meetings, go into our schools, PTO meetings, just being connected and understand, like, it's very disheartening to go to like the town council meetings where there's critical decisions that's made, our school board meetings, our county commissioners meetings and stuff like that. It's disheartening to see the low in attendance because there are important decisions that are being made. But there seems to be a sense of apathy in our communities around really supporting and understanding what's going on rather than just jumping on board. So I think if we continue to build those relationships, be involved, and encourage transparency, it will result in diversity enter into the system.
Thank you. I agree with you completely. And I thank you for scolding me about not attending the commissioners or the Board of Education meetings. So I'll try to straighten up and fly right. I think also a one way to ensure that we have Black and brown teachers is to encourage college students and high school students to go into teaching. talk to them about going into teaching. We have to plant the seeds if we're going to sow, reap the harvest at the end of 4 years of college. And it's worth doing. It's really worth doing. It takes a lot of work and attention to detail. Cheryl Moraven, how can we help these new teachers once they arrive to become great teachers and to sustain their effectiveness in the classroom?
I'd like to reiterate and say good evening to everyone, and to thank you for this opportunity by inviting me and CDE to be a part of this Dockside Chat. I think we can help these teachers become great teachers and sustain their effectiveness by being servant leaders for them, modeling by example, and being mentors for them. By that, reward and encourage those who have the desire to step higher, to go higher, and those who are outspoken, that are aggressive and they go after. Don't look at them as an angry Black woman or a mad Black woman or violent Black man, but look at them as they're wanting to be an example for someone else. They're wanting to be a role model, not just for the Black and brown students, but for all students, because each one teaches one. And so by doing that, they can encourage each other. Also, by letting them know that there is a cultural difference, that we have to have, like Missy said, that equity. I know at the high school recently, they had equity training. And from what I've heard from it and the feedback, it was excellent. It was well received. I'd like to see us do that countywide so that it's in every school. Maybe we start at the high schools and then we branch down. But by doing that, we can make these teachers sustain them and sustain their effectiveness so that it's across the board and that everyone can identify. I know we're making strides now and we're thankful for the partnership with Dr. Jackson. And we don't want to just continue to talk, but we want to put some action into it. And we're seeing that one step at a time. We know, I had a cousin recently tell me that Rome wasn't built in one day. So we know this is not going to happen overnight, but at least we're all having a seat at the table and we're all having an opportunity to have our voices heard. So I'd like to see this sustainability continue. There are resources that are available for our teachers. There's the North Carolina Center for Advancement of Teaching, which is NCAS. Our teachers can go to that, they can apply for it, and it's free for them. They get to stay at a luxury place for 5 whole days a week. They're treated like royalty. I experienced it when I was an administrator at West Carteret, and you get to pick and choose which sessions you want to go to, and that will help our teachers. Also, you were saying about our young students or our young high school seniors coming up and getting them to go into education. Well, we used to have the North Carolina Teachers Fellows years ago, and the General Assembly put it back in place in 2018. So we need to gear some of our teachers who we see work good with children, who have a desire and a passion to work with others, and give them the opportunity, because the North Carolina Teachers Fellows will give them, supplement that tuition so that they do not incur that debt, and so that they will be able to, we can grow our own. I know the community college is doing that, and Dr. Jackson has spoke about that also. So if we use that 2x2, where they go to the community college for 2 years, and then they go to a university of their choice, we can grow our own, and we can start having them come back to our environment, and we can sustain them, and we can have role models right in their own backyard.
Well, I agree with everything you've said. And I also, community college is near and dear to my heart. I just love community college. And this one is so active. They do many wonderful things. Those are great ideas. Before we move on, I want to ask Missy, because she chose really, really hard courses to study in college. She chose STEM studies, which are science, technology, engineering, and math. The things I ran away from. What set you on this course, Missy? And did you have teachers who inspired you?
That is a good question. So I really owe it. A lot of times when we're growing up, we take them for granted, but I really owe it to my parents for taking the time to ensure that we had a great sense of exposure to a variety of areas, from sports. My dad was big in athletics, so we had to do soccer, basketball. We were involved in our church and our community, and the business side of things. In addition to that, I did have community support from teachers who saw that I had gifts in writing, who encouraged me to in things I've never tried before. So that exposure, along with other family members, I had a couple of aunts and uncles who were also engineers. So them sharing their experience. I remember sitting down my senior year with my uncle who went to North Carolina A&T as well as an engineer. And he just told me about the HBCU experience and how it's like no other. You can't go to another school and have HBCU experience. So that set me on my course to A&T. But just my parents and everyone else taking those times to help me to understand who I was and what my inherent gifts were. It made it easy for me, a natural line of progression to, go the course of STEM. I do, however, think, even though that was a path I chose, I do, however, think that it's important that we surround our youth today, because there is a big push on STEM, but I don't think it should minimize the opportunities that's afforded through trades and just really helping a child to understand what their gifts are and shifting them in the right direction. I think that's an awesome thing.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jody Stauffer, we have just heard about expectations from the community. What is your response to these expectations? And do you think that you and the other teachers are up to it?
First off, again, thank you for the invitation tonight. Very pleased to be here and speak with the group. This is a very interesting time for teachers. In my 27 years I've been involved in education, never have we gone through what we're currently going through with COVID and everything, but I'm just so proud of my peers and fellow teachers, because I really feel like they have risen to the occasion. It resulted in a lot of adapting, a lot of taking curriculums that they're used to teaching face-to-face and transitioning those into online curriculums to reach our cohort C students that are learning virtually. And a lot of this was brought on very last minute. And I just am so proud of our educators, because I feel like they really rose to the occasion and met the cost, and are just doing everything imaginable we can right now to make sure that no student is left behind. And now we're starting to get back into having students back into face-to-face instruction. Middle school went back this week. High school went back last week to 4 days a week. And it's just so joyful to see the kids' faces in the hallways. They're glad to be back. Teachers are glad to have desks full in the classroom again. And, it's more of a really comforting feeling that we're getting back to learning again like we had before. And I think everybody is enjoying that.
Well, I'm sure you're right about that. I'm going to ask you an embarrassing question now. Why do you suppose that you were chosen to be the teacher of the year?
I actually think there's a couple things. The first is a lot of what we do is very community based. Not only do I teach all the visual art classes at Croatan, but also serve as our National Art Honor Society advisor. And that is a very much community-based organization. So we do a lot out in the community, and I'm fortunate to have a strong relationship with the Arts Council of Carteret County and work very closely with them. So there's been several events that they've had that we've been able to be a part of. We joined up 3 years ago with the Empty Bowls Project in Morehead City, and we have made and donated ceramic bowls to that, and actually went and worked that event as volunteers. And we're getting out into the nursing homes and doing projects in our nursing homes with our folks that are elderly and those that are in the rehab centers. We have gone to other middle schools and elementary schools for their fall and winter festivals and do face painting and craft stations. It's just a great opportunity for us to take what we're learning inside the classroom, outside of the classroom walls, and apply those to all different situations in our community. So I think that was one of the reasons. And the other one is, again, just taking teaching outside the classroom. I'll give you a great example. We had the opportunity to participate in the Diamond City Gala. 2 falls ago that the Arts Council sponsored, and they actually set up a tent for us and tables. So we were able to invite our art students to participate in this. And for many of them, they have never done anything like this before. So, you know, in your traditional art classroom, a lot of times you're just learning about making art, learning about some art history. Well, this presented some new challenges that, you know, somewhat of what a professional artist would face. So now they've had to think about, okay, I'm selling my work. What am I going to charge for it? Where do I even start thinking about how to charge for my artwork? How do I set up my display so that it's aesthetically pleasing? How do I speak to patrons as they come by? You know, why is it important not to have my nose down in my cell phone the whole time we're there and try to welcome these folks into our tent? And I'm so happy to say at the end of the day, every single kid that participated, we had 16 that we took, they all sold their first piece of artwork. Some made several $100s. And if you could see the look, the esteem boost that these folks had, it's like, you know, a lot of times kids this age don't think their work's very good, but for someone to actually spend their hard-earned money on the work, it's like a huge light bulb goes off and they're like, holy cow, maybe I do know what I'm doing. Maybe I am a pretty good artist. And it was just such a great day for everybody involved. So to be able to do stuff like that, you know, on a regular basis with our students just makes me so excited. And I think that's a big part of what played into me winning the award.
Well, thank you. I'm sure that it did. In your classroom, what is your favorite strategy for getting the best out of your students?
You know, I think it's easy for me because for once I teach a subject that most all kids enjoy. But where I really, something that happened a few years ago that I changed my teaching philosophy is I became more student-based in how I was teaching my project. So everything that we do in the art room is project-based learning. And we try to give the students as much opportunities to make choices as possible. So a lot of times we may dictate the medium that they're using, but we'll give them a general subject area and let them choose the subject matter. Let them choose how they want to arrange the composition. And then as they progress through their years, we give them more and more and more power in making these decisions. So by the time they become an AP student or an Art 4 honors student, they're literally making all the decisions involved in their project. Which I think that they really appreciate. So instead of being dictated what they have to learn in art class, it's more of them being the person who's the initiator, and they're doing the exploring and the experiencing and the testing and all the things involved with learning. So I think that for them, that really turns them on, that you know, they're able to be kind of the person who's in charge of their learning experience.
Well, I think they're very lucky to have you as a teacher. I think I'd like to go back and study art again. I do have to say that although I studied a profession in college, the art and art history courses that I took were the most sustaining throughout my life. They brought the most pleasure that I was able to do things and recognize things and understand things that I would not have if I hadn't taken those courses. So, and Missy in the chat just did a shout out to the art teachers of the world. Thank you, Missy. Art was important to her too. We're going to change gears here and talk with Dr. Rob Jackson. Dr. Jackson, what is a superintendent's role in helping teachers achieve the excellence that we all expect and that teachers hope to achieve? Is Dr. Jackson here?
There we go. I
Oh,
apologize.
there you are.
I was muted after a year of Zoom meetings. I still haven't quite mastered the craft, so I'm working on that. I just wanted to say thank you for the invitation to be here, and thank you to all who've gathered together to really have this conversation about supporting teachers. The strength of our school system and any school system truly is the teachers and the partnership they have with the parents and the community. And so the role of superintendent in that work, I believe, is multifaceted. One of the most important things that I believe a superintendent does for teachers, incredible teachers like Coach Stauffer, is to remove barriers and hurdles, to make sure they have the resources that they need. Earlier, we heard Ms. Johnson very eloquently share how important communication is for teachers. And so doing things like making sure teachers have the equipment they need to be able to communicate, that they've had the training they need to be able to communicate, that they've had the professional development that they need to be able to achieve is one of the big roles. Another piece, and one that I take very seriously, is one that perhaps seems a bit trite, but I think it's one of my most important roles, and that's the role of cheerleader. I believe that one of my truly important tasks as the superintendent of the school system is to amplify the voices of our teachers, to share the amazing work that they're doing in all of the classrooms in the 20 schools across 19 campuses across our county. Particularly right now, while our schools are closed to visitors for safety's sake, parents and community members can't see what's happening in the classroom. I have the blessing of being able to be there, and when I can go out and share the amazing work, I believe it builds support, helps build teacher morale because they recognize that they're appreciated, and that goes to helping us retain great teachers. And so a lot of the work is advocating for our teachers, cheering for our teachers, and making sure they have what they need to do the amazing job they do.
Thank you very much. I agree with the cheerleading. I think that's really important for teachers. Reverend Goodwin, how can the school board promote excellence in teaching?
We do that by, one of the things Dr. Jackson talked about is being encouragers. I know that's not how we're normally seen because we have to take a stand, but we encourage, we do that in person. We encourage organizations to support and encourage our teachers. When I was the president of the Chamber of Commerce in another community, every month we take boxes of fruit, and we just wanted the business community wanted to let the school system, and especially the teachers, know we appreciate what they're doing every day. We have to, it is true, like so many of us, school teachers are public servants, but school teachers are also professionals, and we have to balance that out. And when the community expects them to be professionals, if you expect a lot of me, I will probably live up to that expectation. If you only expect me to do well on end of grade test or whatever only the standard, I'll probably live up to that expectation too, or live down to it. And we have to keep finding ways. We've got great partners in this community that whenever there's excellence, that it's noticed, it's talked about, it's publicized, like Jody and so many others that we have great teachers. And they need it. They, as we've said, they've had a hard year. It's never easy. I married a school teacher, so I used to, every evening we'd have to deprocess the day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's never easy, but with a little encouragement and a lot of encouragement, it motivates and energizes me to be better, and that's our job.
Well, the Board of Education is really important. I have asked Dr. Jackson and Reverend Goodwin to read and reflect upon an article that was published on March 17th in the Carolina Coast Online, an article by J.J. Smith that concluded with this observation: we should most definitely put students first. It does not mean that we have to put teachers last. Mr. Smith's concerns included overwhelming pressure on teachers during the pandemic, which we discussed in the last Dockside Chat, and which are temporary. His concerns about teacher burnout and morale, however, are real, and particularly as they are rewarded or not rewarded by the state of North Carolina. Low salaries, double duty as coaches, long hours, loss of raises for advanced degrees, loss of retirement health benefits, loss of assistant teachers. I could go on. We have more recently in the news a letter to the editor alluding to something. And I wanted to ask Dr. Jackson, does this not make your job much harder?
Well, and thank you for the question, and I appreciate the article. You know, the truth is, this has been a journey in terms of devaluing the profession of teacher. And let me say, I am a teacher and a teacher by trade. And so I say that to say, when I speak of the teaching profession, just know it's something that I'm passionate about. And so as I think about the last many years where teachers' salaries haven't kept up and where teachers have been asked to do more and more, and sometimes with less and less, that makes me very sad, because I recognize, as someone who was the first college student in my family, that it was because of a public school teacher in 5th grade. And by the way, if you're my Facebook friend, and I'd love to be your Facebook friend, send me a request. But if you're my Facebook friend, you would see a post on my page about every 3 months, sometimes even quicker than that, from a Miss Jackie Parham. Miss Parham was my elementary teacher, and all these many years later, she still posts on my Facebook page, Robbie, and I haven't been called Robbie since I was in elementary school. Robbie, I'm so very proud of you. Miss Parham made this radical difference in my life, but not just in my life, but the trajectory of my family. I have 4 beautiful children, and they've all been able to be incredibly successful and go to college. Not that that's the recipe for success for everyone, it certainly isn't, but they've had that opportunity because of amazing public school teachers, because Miss Parham spoke into my life as an elementary student. And so this is an area for all of us to really share our concern, to advocate for our teachers, to recognize that every single day, literally the future of our country, of our society, of our community walks into the classroom, in Mr. Stuffer's classroom, and every other classroom across our county, across our state, and across our country. And when we recognize that importance and that investment we put in our future, we have to step up to that, to say our teachers are professionals. They are really the molders of our future, and we need to make sure that we honor and respect them. And so that is something I'm very passionate about. It's something that we continue to advocate for. But, you know, in many ways, they expect superintendents to advocate for teachers, and we should. But as community members, taking the opportunity to share how important our teachers are is very, very important, to make sure we're moving the needle to take care of our great teachers. Because without great teachers, quite literally, there's no great school system. We have to have our teachers, and we've got to make sure we're taking care of them.
Sorry, me too. I'm still making Zoom mistakes. I agree with you completely. And before I move on to another question, I wanted to ask Reverend Goodwin if he would like to add to what he just heard.
The 2 most important quality of life issues are medicine and education. And the article that you sent us saddens me as well, because educating our young people is an important quality of life issue. When we look at how do we make a difference in their lives, like for all of us, it was teachers. And when we take away benefits, when we put them in larger classrooms, when their work environment isn't good, when their pay doesn't keep abreast as it should, we're saying to them, you're not important. You're not a professional, and we believe differently. And some of our job is we've got to start lobbying just on what we can control. One is within the county with the commissioners, what we'd like to do. And then as we're already lobbying with our legislators, because that's where the bulk of their salary is coming from, and we need them to step up.
Right, right. All of us can help by writing to our state senators. Someone asked in the chat earlier, where do we find that information? There's a lot of information on the Carteret County page. If you go to carteretcounty.gov, there everything is listed there. It's a very important site. We also have information on the Democratic Party page, or if you really got desperate, you could Google North Carolina state senators. It's not difficult to do this. It is not difficult. I sat down a few weeks ago and sent out a letter to 50 different senators in the US Senate. And it did not take me more than 2 hours, including writing the letter. I wrote the letter and sent them out. Things are much easier than they used to be today. So we, we are powerful, we have a voice, and we can get behind the school board and the superintendent of schools and see if we can get better benefits for teachers, better pay, and certainly after a lifetime of teaching, one deserves health insurance in retirement. Thank you to all of our presenters for very interesting observations. I'm going to turn the floor, as it were, over to Lucy, who will handle our questions from the audience. Lucy, it's all yours. And you're muted, dear.
I'm not very good either, but anyway, but thanks for all of you, for being here. Everyone on the panel is just so important to our community, to the life of our community. So I appreciate what each of you do too. Well, I did look through the questions, and the whole thing about teachers and salaries is very important. I'm a retired teacher too, so I know I appreciate my benefits, that I still receive my pension and my health insurance. I do wonder about the supplement. Reverend Goodman, I know that, maybe there's a chance we could increase the supplement in Carteret County. I know that Craven County is, I taught there, I know they're a little higher, and Onslow County is even higher than that. What do you think about supplements and what we can do for our teachers?
I agree, but then my mind thinks, okay, how can we do it? Because we don't have the monies. And I know that the county commissioners want to see a plan from us as a supplement schedule where it'll incrementally keep moving in a direction. And we've got to do that as the Board of Education. We need to show them why this is important. We need to show them we have a plan, and that way they can plan. I'm not trying to just make it easy for them. We're trying to sell them on why this is in the best interest of Carteret County. So we've got to do a better job at that. I hope that helps.
Well, and also I wanted to ask too about resources. Like I know how important it is for teachers to have, people in their school to help them. Teachers are everything. They're the social worker, the nurse. I mean, especially, in elementary school. So how can we help those, help in that way? I guess, Dr. Jackson, what would you say as far as, especially, I think, coming back from this pandemic, and we see children are behind, and so we're worried about remediation, we're worried about the mental health of students. So it's a hard thing to think about, and I know it takes a lot. How can we help in that way? How will the schools help, or the state?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Bond, for that important question. The support services, which are those services that surround a teacher, are incredibly important. Support services like a guidance counselor or a mental health therapist or a school social worker or teacher assistants or tutors or reading specialists, all of those support services are very important to help meet the needs of the whole child, which is a term that we've begun to really use when we recognize that we exist to not only help a child academically, but to help them grow socially and emotionally, and to ensure that they have strong mental health and mental well-being as well. And so in terms of increasing that, our role, each of us, is to talk about the importance of that. We really have great power when we use our voice to share how important that is to us. Recently, we've learned that we'll be receiving, all school systems will, ESSER's money, which is money as a result of the pandemic. And part of that money will be dedicated to support services like ensuring school nurses. So, for example, one of the things that our Board of Education did this year, and I was so very grateful, was to allow us to add almost twice as many nurses as we've had historically, so that we almost have a nurse in every single school, except for our very smallest schools where we have a shared nurse to use that resource well. Those school nurses have been absolutely critical this year during the pandemic as we've worked through all of the medical needs. But they're important all the time as we see things like tree nut allergies, the rate of that going up, as we see the rate of diabetes among children going up, as we see these great medical needs. Having that school nurse as our health specialist, our medical specialist on campus is so very important. And so I appreciate the Board of Education in supporting that. And we want to do everything we can to make that sustaining. So going forward, post-pandemic, we continue to have those resources. And so to the question of how can we make a difference, it's really about speaking up and helping with sharing with representatives and sharing with those at the state level the importance of those positions, so it doesn't become an either or. Either you get more teachers or you get student support services. It becomes a both and. We need both the teachers and the student support services because it really is teamwork that makes our dream work.
Right, yeah. Well, as a parent like Jennifer, how do you feel about the support services? And Katie, I see Katie's here too. How do you, as you know, parents with young children, you know, I think that what Dr. Jackson says is true. Sometimes you have to choose a little bit, and the teacher becomes a little bit of, you know, of everything. I don't know, maybe one of you could address, Jennifer, you could go first about, you know, the services at your school.
Yes, we used to share a nurse, so I was so excited this year when we have a full-time nurse who has probably been the hardest working person in our school this year. And then we've always been lucky, since my daughter McKenna has attended, to have a full-time counselor in the school, which has really been wonderful. I know some other schools have to share them. So that's really been excited. We don't have an SRO at our school, but we have a lot of sheriffs that stop by from time to time. And I don't see the need at our school for that like I do to have the school counselor and the nurse there. So I'm really happy to hear that almost every school is also getting to experience what we have at the elementary school level.
Yeah, that's good. Katie, did you want to chime in? I know you're not on the panel, but I know you have young children. And
children sound like they're going to come through my roof. So if you hear anything, it's just them. We're also been really blessed. My school has Newport L has 2 counselors that are full-time, and we've had a full-time nurse, which is amazing. I do think Jennifer's really fortunate that Bogue Sound's such a lockdown school and there is an SRO at Croatan. But I really would love for every school to have an SRO, and not just because of school safety, which is obviously really important, but just having that role model and knowing that there's an officer that they can speak to and not being scared of police or feeling like it's something that they should fear right now, but having another role model in person they can talk to, I think would be really valuable. And then some of the schools just aren't as locked down, and I think that's a crucial part. Something that I think would be worth funding. I think it's one of those that sometimes we're not that we're being reactive instead of proactive. So I would love to see that change in our schools. Otherwise, I think we've been really fortunate with amazing support staff.
that's great. That's good. I did want to ask Missy and Cheryl about attracting. How do you think we could attract more diverse teachers? What comes to mind when you think about having those role models in our school? I know they're good for all children. A diverse staff is good for everyone. What would you say, Missy?
I was going to yield to Ms. Moraven. So from the student perspective, I think it is very essential. I was fortunate. I was very blessed to have Ms. Opal Bostic as my kindergarten teacher. So from an early age, I saw someone who looked like me that I could look up to, I could respect, I could go to with concerns. It was one experience. My mom, she was getting her hair, she was having surgery. And so she had my aunt to do my hair for picture day. And I was like, I didn't want my aunt to do my hair for picture day. I want to take it out. So I didn't know I looked the best, but Miss Boston understood my hair and understood that it looked the best. So she tried to help me out and she braided it back. And I took it out again. And those are the worst pictures. But just having a teacher that can really understand you beyond the books and beyond, so I think making sure that that's in place for children, as we posed to the school board when we went to them, each generation has that opportunity kind of minimized. And so unless we're intentional about seeing the importance of not just for one specific group of kids, but for everybody, how it helps you when you get to the workplace of having to deal with, because I can tell you right now, it doesn't just stop in school. Once you become a professional, knowing how to interact and understanding other people and their cultural experiences is very essential part of life. And so just building those networks, forming those relationships with our colleges, the grow your own model, it's there. So it's just that we have to be intentional in using it and making sure that we see diversity in our school system.
And I agree with everything that Missy has said, because I know of my own 3 young adult children. My daughter, she didn't have any minority teachers until she got to high school. Those at the high school that she had were impactful on her because she was involved in extracurricular activity and they happened to be a sponsor. My 2 sons, one didn't have one until he got to high school and one had one in middle school, but they can think back on it and they remember those who they came in contact with because they did have that role model who looked like them. Now that they're professionals, they want, well, my son who has a daughter wants his daughter to have someone who looks like him so that she can identify with. It's not so much as you want a Black teacher all the way through, but you want somebody who's positive, who's going to leave that impression on them that you can do or be whatever you want to be, that you're not limited in your role. It's nice to be a cafeteria worker. It's nice to be a bus driver. It's nice to be a secretary. But whatever you choose to be the best that you can be of that one. Make sure that you're setting high expectations. And so if we can grow our own, if that's what it's going to take for Carteret County, or if we can do the 2x2 with the community college, but we need to put something in place so that we can work towards that so that our children have that role model and there's an avenue, a pathway, an action plan for them to go through to reach their goal.
And I know you are an administrator, Cheryl, and I wanted to ask, at the last chat, someone had the question, Dr. Jackson, about East Carteret having several principals in over a short amount of time. And I know I've had that experience as a teacher. They were all good though, which was great. But so I wondered, about that kind of situation. And I know there's a few concerns about it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Bond. I can only share that while I've been superintendent, there's only been one principal of East Carteret High School. So there you go. I'm just being a little silly. So it is important that we have stability of leadership. And so one of the things that I've shared with our principals and with our assistant principals is that I'm not a superintendent who believes in just moving principals around to move principals around. I do believe that when a principal has the opportunity to really become invested in the school and really get to know the teachers, that the school is able to move forward. Now, there's sometimes when a principal may ask for a new career opportunity. There's sometimes where it just makes sense for the school to make a change. And so those times do happen. But all in all, I'd much prefer to see a principal be able to bloom where they grow, where they've been planted, and be able to see the school continue to move forward in a very positive way. And so I do appreciate the question. That was certainly a concern that I heard as I arrived. And so a part of making sure we have great principals long-term at each school is making sure we do a great job in our application process and in our hiring process, and really vetting our candidates and making sure that the voices of the school are a part of the process. And so when we've hired principals this year, we've had teachers from the school be a part of the process, who become a part of that decision-making process in terms of who goes forward. So ultimately, when I'm in front of the Board of Education recommending a principal to be hired for a particular school, and the board says, well, what do the teachers think? I can share, well, teachers were a part of the process to come to this recommendation for this individual. And so that's very important. And it really goes right back to the heart of this conversation tonight, which is the retention and recruitment of great teachers. When teachers recognize that their voice is heard, respected, and they feel that that's authentic, that they feel like they are decision makers in the school and they are valued, that becomes something that makes them want to continue to be a part of the school system and continue to be in the school itself. And so I very much appreciate that feedback and the concerns about the change of principals. There was quite a few at one point, and so we're looking forward to stability of leadership in all of our schools moving forward.
Yes, that's good. Well, that's good to know. I think Mr. Stouffer has a little shout out for someone at the school, the current principal. Sue, is there time for one more question?
Yes, you may have one.
Okay, I wanted to ask Mr. Stouffer a question. You know, I really like the idea of student-based work and project-based. I know that, you know, that's kind of a big thing in schools. And so I know I can see in art, you know, how that would be great to be project-based or, you know, in student-led and that sort of thing. I mean, do you have any advice for others about how to promote project-based learning? I mean, did you find that in the pandemic, you know, that was a good way to get students engaged?
Yeah, it is. And it's so funny that you bring that up. I'm actually a member of our leadership committee at Croatan as well, and have shared the same thing with them. And we are actually in the process of putting together a professional development for me to share this. And it kind of falls under the umbrella of a teaching philosophy called Understanding by Design, which is totally based on project-based learning. So we're going to be presenting to other curriculums, you know, how can you take this and put it into the history class and put it into the math class and put it into the English class? Because some of the teachers are commenting that when they do more project-based learning, they're getting more participation from students. The students are more enthusiastic about learning. They're taking more of the learning on their own shoulders with the research that they're doing. So I'm very excited to be a part of that, and would be glad to report back to our group on how that goes. But the wheels have been put in motion for us to share more about project-based learning and how we can implement this with other curriculums.
Yes, I think that's great. I think that's a great way to learn. So anyway, I think unless there are any other questions or any other comments, Sue, I think that's pretty much it.
Very good. Thank you, Lucy. Our time is just about up, and we promise to be punctual. I thank everyone heartily for joining us, and most especially, of course, our guests, Jennifer Johnson, Cheryl Moraven, Missy Oden, Jody Stouffer, the Reverend Dennis Goodwin, and Dr. Rob Jackson. Our next Dockside Chat on the schools is scheduled for April 20th. It is an update on school bond spending featuring Mr. Richard Paler, Assistant Superintendent for Strategic Improvement. He's in charge of $42 million. And that sounds like a great discussion to me. Thank you very much for being here. I will see you at the next chat. And Katie, could you turn off unmute everyone so that we can say goodbye?
They can self-unmute.
Oh, we have to self-unmute. Okay, well, bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Excellent conversation.
Everybody.
Bye, Phil.
Bye. Bye, everyone. See you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for
Thank
being
you,
here.
Sue.